Hello and welcome to Inside View. My name's Cory Burnell and I'll be the host for this episode. Thank you for joining us, and we're excited to have one of our supervisors from our Calaveras County Board of Supervisors joining us today, Mr. Ben Stopper from District 5. Ben?
Good to see you, Mr. Burnell.
Nice to see you again, as always.
Thank you for having me.
You bet, buddy. Well, man, we've got a lot to talk about. I mean, there's many things been going on in the county, and one of those items, well, you know what? Before we get into the real meat and potatoes here, what we're going to talk about, let voters know a little bit about yourself, our viewers here, and you live in District 5. Tell them where District 5 is and what your boundaries are, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, District 5 tends to be on the southern-western side of the county. Basically, the Highway 26 corridor and the Milton Road, including Rancho Calaveras, very small sliver, lock antenna, and then down to the San Joaquin and Stanislaus County lines.
Okay.
It tends to be the more valley side of the county, and it includes Hogan Dam and the Calaveras River.
Well, now it gets all the way over to Copper too, doesn't it? Copperopolis? Is that in District 5 now?
No, it's not. That's District 4 solidly.
Oh, okay.
The District 5 line runs typically off of Hogan Dam Road that goes behind Hogan, and it goes down to basically Rock Creek. The road when you drive out to the landfill to drop off your waste solids is actually the line between District 4 and District 5.
Oh, okay.
Down on that end.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. And I know, you've been in Calaveras County maybe your whole life, if I'm not mistaken, right?
At a very young age, we moved over from Amador County. So, yeah, I've been in this region my life.
Yeah. And then this is your first term on the Board of Supervisors right now, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're about a year and a half into it, something like that?
Yeah, a year and 3 months.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. You gonna run again, you think? You gonna try to do it again?
Right now I'm really enjoying it. Working with the people. Moving forward as a county. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from my constituents. There's always going to be the few naysayers out there and the people that are unhappy for one reason or another, and that's their right. But I mean, for overall, I've had really good feedback from our constituents, and not just from our district, but from across the entire county.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, excellent. Well, buddy, let's get into some of the things we've got going on here in the county, and one that's been long-standing issue and been going on for many, many years is the general plan. Its creation, development, revision, and now implementation. So will you give our viewers an update on where we're at with the general plan as a county?
Well, I think last year we as a board took a very broad step forward and actually implemented the general plan in what's been worked on for years. I mean, 14 years plus, and it's been since 1997 since the last revision of the general plan. So we've taken a broad step forward. Now we're to the point where it's implementation of that general plan and the intent that was put forward by the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission last year. And there's a broad scheme of things when it comes to ordinances and like our land use map and implementing those so that they fit within the vision of the general plan, let's say.
Okay. So we've got to get ordinances in conformity with it.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. There's housing development and the housing plan. We say one thing in the general plan about what our site is for the future for the next so many years on housing development and everything. And our ordinances throughout the planning department or the building department don't necessarily reflect what we put forward. So at that time, it will take a few years to go through and implement and make the needed, let's say, amendments to each one of these ordinances to be able to bring the broad view within focus of the general plan.
Right, absolutely. Okay, and then, with the land use map, that hasn't been updated since 1997, I presume?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the most part, yes. You know, there's small updates. You know, people have had zoning amendments and such. There's definitely been some development since then.
Yeah.
And so there has been things that have changed within it that are conform within a zoning amendment. You know, that we can do 4 amendments to the general plan a year. So we can lump as many of those into an amendment at one time.
Oh, I see.
But, you know, moving forward, the entire county, you know, the planning commission multiple times went over, you know, the entire map of the county, and there was some broad changes. Kind of a joke I said during the board meeting is, you know, there's a lot of RR in the county, and a lot of people know that stands for rural residential. It's like, well, it's kind of also at the same time stands for no rhyme or reason, because Calaveras County over the years has become a checkerboard of zoning uses, you know, and they don't really conform in one area from one way or another, and there's no real rhyme or reason to that. So, you know, we can't always just change someone's zone, but we made the broad attempt to bring it into conformity in certain areas so that it reflected the area in the same way.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, changing somebody's zoning could impact the value of their property, and
absolutely. And there. You know, if they've always had it that way, you're going to get a legitimate complaint like,
yeah,
why are you violating my land use rights? You know, I want to keep it the way it always was, and you know that's a hardship on the county because, well, we had good intent when we were doing it, and so sometimes we were able to pull it back when people didn't want what they were being asked to do.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you know, one thing that I know you've been getting some questions on is recently the governor's order with regard to homeless encampments, that type of setting aside provision for those uses. And I suppose you've been receiving some questions about maybe Caltrans actions on this subject in our county?
Absolutely, and yeah, I've been reached out from multiple news sources. I've had plenty of calls from the constituents in our area because there is one property that was proposed by Caltrans in the 7800 block of Highway 26 right across from Warren Road, which falls within my district. And you know, a lot of people, you know, it's like their first worries, for example, their property values. You know, if there's the thought of possibly a homeless encampment being in your backyard,
sure.
You know, you're going to worry about your land value and possible other impacts from that type of use. At the same time, I do want to say it's important for us to realize that, you know, sometimes a lot of these people don't have a choice in being in that. And when it comes to our own community, we should definitely think about helping our own and giving possibly a hand up, you know, and not be inconsiderate of their needs, because there are legitimately people that do have needs when they're homeless. That said, the 7800 block of Highway 26 is like getting very close to the San Joaquin County line. We don't have services out there. For one, we don't have water, we don't have sewer, we don't have transportation to that area, and then a broad number of other services such as medical. It's going to be over 5 miles away. I mean, even with the new clinic that we have in Valley Springs, you know, it's quite a distance to that, and then, you know, food and everything else. So right now, the viability of the spot that's proposed isn't there in my mind, in my perception. And the way the Executive Order N2320 was written by Governor Newsom, these are things to be implemented by the counties. He is providing a possible path, and he asked Caltrans to come forward with prospective properties that they aren't using. This is one of the ones that Caltrans brought up. There was no thought into the viability of the property so much as this is property we're not using that we could possibly lease to the county for this type of use for $1 a year, and, you know, at a reduced rate, so that you could possibly use it to help the homeless. There's another similar property offered to Sonora up in Tuolumne County, but it's within the city limits. I mean, that's their choice if they do choose to implement that. But the way the governor's order is written is it's up to the county to implement these things. The state's offering one-time funds and resources. And if the county ever decides to go into doing something like this, we need to be thoughtful of the future, probably pragmatic about it, and with the fact that what's this going to be, the recurring cost of something like this going to be to the county? And the thought that right now, yes, sure, they're offering us, let's say, $300,000 in one-time funds, but how long will that last with this type of use, and how will we afford it in the future to carry it on?
Right.
So I mean, that's a broad subject to be brought up before the Board of Supervisors. It's not something that we have asked staff to move forward on. And just last year, we've given staff a different direction other than building homeless shelters as to provide services to certain people, and as opposed to providing them a place just to stay.
Yeah.
So I mean, we'll be our Health and Human Services Director, Kristen Stranger, will be bringing that back before the board in the next few months. I talked to her today. And, we'll be giving further direction. And people will be able to see what, the intent of the board is and how we do decide to provide services in the future. I don't foresee that being the 7800 block of Highway 26.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, well, the silver lining being that, okay, it's Caltrans just making counties aware of potential sites.
Right.
And then it sounds to me like all further control and decision-making authority resides with the community.
So far until the governor puts forward another executive order. But right now it's written that way, so we still have control.
Okay. Yeah. He wouldn't do anything we dislike up here in Calaveras County.
No comment.
Well, hey, we just had an election last night. I mean,
Yes.
so we've got a lot of interesting topics to discuss there. I mean, we see, Prop 13 that would have impacted people's taxes significantly that voters rejected.
I'm very happy to hear that. I think a lot of people are wary of new taxes, especially when it comes to it was put forward as a school bonds, but within written was the fact that, they're going to have to tax us to pay back those bonds.
Yeah.
And we need to be wary of taking away anything like Prop 13 in the future. I think we'll probably be on another vote during the general election in this November that's going to go down somewhat the same path that the voters are going to have to really watch closely.
Well, yeah, and to be clear, I mean, there's the 1978 Prop 13 that protects taxpayers, and then you've got today's Prop 13, which would have very greatly burdened taxpayers by eliminating some of those previous protections.
Absolutely, agreed.
Well, also, and interesting on Prop 13 for our viewers to know a little bit about our community as compared to statewide. The statewide vote, I think, went something like 54 or 58% against Prop 13, but Calaveras County went 3-1, almost 75%. It was like 74% against the Prop 13. This year's Prop 13, we'll put it that way. So that tells you a little bit about the contrast between our county and the rest of the state. Well, we have one race for the Board of Supervisors. That's up in the air, and that's District 4, right? Current Supervisor Dennis Mills and Amanda Follendorf.
Yes, sir.
Previously been the mayor of Angels Camp.
Yeah, City Council, I believe, since 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the last count was Amanda was up a couple percentage points, maybe 51-49, something like that, with, what do you say, a few thousand votes still outstanding?
I believe elections has probably about 4,000 votes to count across the entire county.
Oh, okay.
All things being equal, plus or minus, there's probably 800 votes to be counted within District 4.
Yeah.
Margin of error for that, not much. I would foresee that, if things trended the way they were, she would come out on top, possibly,
Yeah.
by the end of this.
Yeah, to be determined, huh?
Yes.
Well, there've been, I guess you might say, a rotation on the board with some of the views surrounding one of the controversial, issues in the county, cultivation or commercial cultivation of cannabis. So let's talk a little bit about the permanent ordinance that the board passed last year, and I think it went into effect in late December, correct?
Yeah, early December, it was
Early
full
December.
and 60-day period for fees and such, yes.
Okay. So we've covered this topic on previous shows with other guests, but the fee for the permit or the registration is about $12,400, something like that.
Approximately, yes.
Yeah, and then you have to have previously had a county registration as well as a state temporary license at least, and so
At least be in good standing with the process with the state.
Okay.
With the state licensure process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in good standing with the county at the end, at the time they put in the ban.
And of course, some of the important differences were the parcel size, 20-acre minimums now instead of what had previously been 2-acre minimums under the urgency ordinance.
Yes, sir.
There are other differences you'd like to point out about the permanent versus the
Yes,
urgency?
we completely eliminated rural residential and other residential areas from being that 2-acre minimum. We put it in ag, general forest, and a multitude of uses that reflect agriculture. And the purpose behind that was more so to move it out of the communities that the urgency ordinance had inundated with grows prior, being in people's face. So, essentially what the board did was, limit the number of growers. Potentially there was 700 some odd originally with the just commercial growers with the original urgency ordinance, and we limit that number down to approximately 190. So we scaled that back, and then we pushed them farther back away from, denser communities, so it wasn't right in everyone's face. This is something, you bring up the election right before this, and this is something when I was out campaigning, every time we go on election, everyone's like, it's about cannabis again, and look, we're not just a cannabis county, there's a lot more to us, and we need to broaden our scope, but at the same time, I went through and I explained to the people when I was out canvassing that, I was pro-regulation, and I explained to them. Some of them were like, yeah, I was for a ban during the UO, and I explained to them, what my thoughts on it were and how I could possibly move it out of their neighborhood. And then, down the road, when we get in potential tax money, we can come back and fix that pothole out in front of his driveway that was really concerning him.
Right.
People were really receptive to that, to the point where I pulled about 64% of the vote, and I didn't hide from that question. It was straightforward,
Yeah.
And District 5 is one of the hot seats of the county when it comes to politics. So, I'm pretty proud of that record.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you bring up the point of that regulation generates revenue for enforcement of the law.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about what you've seen happen during the ban and the loss of revenue. How has that impacted enforcement against illegal growing, for example, or protection of the environment? What's happened there?
Well, when we were putting together the ordinance this last year, the permanent ordinance, I put a finding into it. At the end, it's like during a ban, we have not fully addressed the environmental concerns from illegal grows, possible pesticides and everything. What we go out and we bust those grows. The Sheriff's Department has done a phenomenal job of stepping it up year by year, going after them, which is good. If people aren't going to follow the laws, it's good our Sheriff's Department's out there being strong,
Right.
putting forward the fact that, we're going to let the rest of California know, look, you can still come here and try and do things illegally, it's not going to be easy, We're getting more and more of you. There's less places for you to hide. And if you're going to want to do that illicit activity, it's going to be easier for you to do it someplace else. So
Right.
don't play in our backyard. So I do want to, compliment our sheriff's department when it comes to their action and everything. Originally, during the urgency ordinance, we pulled in over $13 million in taxes from that were paid. Yes, there were some not paid. The total could have been up closer to $16 million. But those are people that didn't pay, don't qualify for this new ordinance.
Right.
That was an automatic rejection out of the system. So that $13 million has gone a long ways in helping our sheriff's department, take care of these things. But that money's run out. It was a good buffer for a little while, But when you have an exhaustive cost of trying to enforce against illegal grows, and you don't have revenue coming back in to supplement that, the cost is exponentially higher. So we have to be pragmatic about how we move forward. We'll start out with a small amount of registered growers. As as it becomes successful, use their money to go after the illegal ones. Start taking care of the environmental concerns that we haven't taken care of during the ban, and get rid of some of that burden to our finances across the county, when it comes to taking care of these things, The cost of it may be exponentially more, as other people have argued in the past, but that exponential number being higher when we don't have any revenue during a ban, as opposed to having regulation with some revenue to offset that cost in the future.
I remember a couple of years ago the sheriff giving a presentation at one of the board meetings about what they were finding coming across marijuana grows and the environmental abuse that was occurring. And he, from what I recall, he had said that, well, this is principally illegal grow problem that, of course, I suppose if you had a legal grow and you're violating the law like that, you're going to become an illegal one because you have your registration revoked, right?
Right.
But that said, there was money at the time with the marijuana enforcement team, the
Yes.
MET team,
Yeah.
to go ahead and try to mitigate or remediate those problems. And so where are we at now are we just not able to do that remediation?
During the ban, they hadn't coordinated between environmental health, a hazmat team, and the sheriff's department and code compliance to take care of those. So the remediation is not there. The intent was to move forward and stop all these illegal grows. Well, you know what? They've been here for a long time. Ever since I was a kid hiking around here in the hills, we would come across them.
Yeah.
So the remediation part is something that hasn't been a step that's been taken throughout the ban, and is something that I've solidly brought up at the Board of Supervisors recently that we're going to start taking steps to take care of. And I sat down and I talked to the sheriff about how we're going to build this bridge of remediation. Because, at one point it's like, okay, we can, arrest all these illegal cultivators who want, but when they walk away, they leave a mess.
Right.
And, the sheriff's primary thing is to get the marijuana out of there, and they bury it at the landfill. And at that, and then after that, there's chemicals that end up sitting out there from these illegal grows that what's going to happen with them after no one's there to take care of them? Nothing.
Right.
So,
yeah, what about abatement? Are there ways? I guess we put a lien on the property. Is that one way in which we pay for?
There are clear paths.
Yeah.
And I've sat down with the sheriff and talked to him more so recently, and we're going to bring environmental health into the envelope. We have to bring in code compliance because they're the ones that go out and cite, what they see that falls outside the code so much. Because a lot of these environmental crimes are not necessarily crimes until we figure out that they're outside the code of what's put forward by either state law, federal, or county ordinances. And at that point, you know, we got to rebuild our hazmat team, which does fall within the sheriff's department.
Okay.
And then we got to get environmental health out with agriculture, which falls within our environmental health, to identify those pesticides and even certain types of fertilizers. You know, there's nitrate concerns for runoff and everything, especially with our watersheds and us being a county higher up that, you know, need to be mitigated. And at that point, once we go through the process, there's the administrative cost to that. And then we, you know, potentially could go after the landowner and put a lien on the property until it's either paid, or if we don't see that, 5 years later, there may be an auction off of someone's property because they weren't willing to clean it up properly.
Right. Right.
Which is nothing nice to do, but, you know, we got to bring people in line. We can't be poisoning the people downstream from us.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, now with the implementation of it, and where I wanted to go with it was the taxes, we still have Measure C in place. Do we have any estimates on what revenue might look like? We're not going to be using a canopy tax any longer, but rather track and trace from the state, so tax will be based on pounds.
It's
based on weight.
Based on weight. There's a few things. I will be bringing this back in front of the board in March during a study session. I'm not going to talk about this too much in depth right now because we're gonna propose some changes to Measure C. I think that I foresee that we may go in the direction of going back to a canopy tax on everything and just doing a flat rate. That way, you know, if anybody fails at producing anything, they still pay their taxes for their business.
Right.
If someone, you know, somehow is able to move outside the system, they're still paying out. They're still paying their taxes to the county.
Yeah, because of the registered canopy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the track and trace does seem like it would be difficult to implement, or at least keep honest.
Right.
Almost expensive to keep honest, I would think.
Right. Absolutely. And with a flat canopy tax, you know, we know exactly how many square feet that people are applying for. We go out and we do our inspections and make sure they're within those confines of that. And at that point, you know, and actually, I think the weight tax is overburdensome for the market the way it's going right now, especially with the state tax stacked on top of that. So it's you know, the cost for a product to bring it to a certain point to where you're going to sell it, then you get taxed so much, the profits aren't there.
Yeah, and it's caused the black market to continue to be vibrant and work just fine, right?
Right. So a little leniency towards them, and on one hand, at the same hand, it's good, a canopy tax will hold them accountable for that. And I think that would be a first step into providing a clear path for industry to be successful in Calaveras County.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep our eyes on developments there, and I know our viewers are going to be watching the news and watching the supervisors' meetings to see how things develop here as the permanent ordinance is implemented. But Ben, we've used up our half hour, so thanks for coming and spending your time with us and sharing all of this information. I want to thank our viewers for joining us on this edition of Inside View again, and we'll see Ben on here again soon, I'm sure. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Burnell.
Take care.